There are few games out there that can boast they've started their own genre, and although rogue, and by extension roguelike video games, don't appeal to everyone, it's impossible to deny the impact that the 1980 titles had on the world. But what if you've already played Rogue and are desperate for more like it? There's a whole world of roguelikes out there, so how do you separate the good from the bad? For this list, we're shining a light on some of the finest examples of roguelike games that history has to offer. But what makes a game a roguelike, I hear you cry? As with many terms in the games industry, the exact definition of roguelike is up for debate, but there are a number of features that most roguelike games have in common. Firstly, they must have some degree of procedural generation, meaning that players won't see the same level layout more than once. Additionally, roguelikes often utilise a permadeath mechanic, so if your character dies, you'll need to start all over again. There are other features present in many roguelikes, but random dungeon generation and permadeath are two big ones. Now that's cleared up, I'm Ashton from TripleJump and here are 10 great roguelikes that aren't rogue. Number 10, Returnal. There were some naysayers out there who thought a AAA roguelike would never work, that the genre was far too niche for a game like Returnal to enjoy any kind of success. Those people were wrong, as not only was Returnal very well received by critics, but it also sold very well. Returnal follows Celine Vassos, an Astra Corporation explorer who lands on the planet of Astropos to investigate the White Shadow signal. Stranded and unable to contact Astra, Celine begins exploring the planet's surface, only to find multiple corpses that look exactly like her. She discovers that every time she dies, she's transported back to her starting point, and that the planet changes with every loop. Although some critics were upset by Returnal's lack of save feature, especially those whose runs were interrupted by automatic PS5 updates, others were very impressed by all the game had to offer. Don't get us wrong, Returnal's gameplay can take a bit of getting used to. It can be punishingly difficult at times, and the permadeath mechanic can be a little daunting for those new to the genre. But if you're willing to stick with it, you're certain to find something to love. Number 9, Loop Hero. A game where you're tasked with just bopping around a looping dungeon slaying enemies on repeat probably doesn't sound like it'd be very interesting, but trust us when we say that despite its simple sounding premise, Loop Hero is very much worth your time. At the beginning of Loop Hero, the player character awakens in a small camp and must set out on a quest to rebuild the world after an evil lich has destroyed it. It's a tough job, but hey, someone's gotta do it. On each expedition, players travel through an empty land, with slimes appearing periodically. When the player defeats them, they're rewarded with landscape cards, which they can use to place mountains, forests, buildings, and other such features on the path, and which each grant different effects. After the player completes the loop, they're given the option to return to their base or go round again for a chance for more resources. Succeed, and they'll keep everything they've earned. Fail, and they'll lose the vast majority of it. Loop Hero successfully combines a number of different genres, so if you're seeking a title that's part roguelike, part deck builder, and part RPG, then you've come to the right place. Number 8, Enter the Gungeon. If you could get your hands on a gun that had the ability to kill the past, what would you choose to get rid of? Personally, I'd go back and redo all the moments where a waiter has told me to enjoy my meal, and I've responded with, "You too." Sadly, such an object does not exist in the real world, so I must content myself with Enter the Gungeon, the bullet hell roguelike that sees players taking on the role of a gungeoneer and doing everything they can to change their past. Players start out by choosing from one of 4 protagonists: the Marine, the Convict, the Pilot, and the Hunter, all of whom have different special abilities. Upon entering the Gungeon, they must traverse multiple floors, fighting their way through randomised rooms and procedurally generated enemies using guns they can find in chests, win from bosses, or buy in one of the game's shops. Enter the Gungeon impressed critics upon its release, garnering praise for its action-packed gameplay, charming pixel graphics, and terrific sense of humour, though some reviewers did warn that the difficulty may put some players off. Still, if you're up for the challenge, then Enter the Gungeon is a whole load of gun-toting fun. Number 7, Dead Cells. Here at Team TripleJump, we like to know we're getting our money's worth from the video games we play, so it's exciting to us when a game comes along that combines some of our favourite genres into one reasonably priced package. Prior to 2018, if we wanted to play a roguelike, a Metroidvania, and a Souls-like, we'd have had to have bought 2 or 3 different games, and that's just not very economical, is it? Luckily though, Dead Cells came along and relieved the guilt associated with maxing out our credit cards on the Steam store. Dead Cells tells the story of a prisoner, a gelatinous creature who must escape the confines of a dungeon by possessing dead bodies. Like in a Souls series, there is little in the way of obvious exposition, and so players must figure out the plot by carefully reading any bits of text they come across in the world. As players explore, they can collect cells, which can be used to obtain permanent upgrades which will make each run a little easier. Be careful to spend them as soon as you can though, because dying not only sends you back to the prisoners' quarters, but it also causes all your unspent cells to be lost. Oh nuts. I was just 2 cells away from retirement. Number 6, Crypt of the Necrodancer. Are you in the mood for dancing? Necromancing? Then oh boy do I have a recommendation for you. Crypt of the Necrodancer is a 2015 indie adventure that combines the roguelike and rhythm genre into one brilliant, if slightly bizarre, title. The game stars Cadence, the daughter of a missing treasure hunter who falls into the crypt of the Necrodancer whilst looking for her dad. The Necrodancer steals her heart and forces her to face off against his evil minions in order to retrieve it. As with traditional roguelikes, players must explore procedurally generated dungeons, and should they die, they'll be forced to go back to the beginning. Upgrades can be bought using diamonds, and though players will lose their equipment if they die during a run, they won't lose their diamonds or the permanent power-ups they've purchased. The twist, though, is that Cadence can only move or perform attacks to the beat of the music, meaning that players will need to learn monsters' attack patterns in order to strike at the opportune moment. What's more, is that if you really want to channel Dance Dance Revolution, Crypt of the Necrodancer supports the use of a dance mat, so you can boogie on down whilst trying to defeat the Necrodancer's many henchmen. Number 5, FTL, Faster Than Light. It was Buzz Lightyear who said, "To infinity and beyond." But if you were to apply a similar catchphrase to FTL Faster Than Light, it would probably be along the lines of, "To infinity and back to the start of the game repeatedly." FTL takes place in space, where a war is raging between the Galactic Federation and the xenophobic rebels. The player controls a single spaceship capable of travelling at speeds faster than light, and must pilot said ship across 8 different sectors in order to deliver a data packet to the Federation that will ensure their victory. Players begin the game by choosing a spacecraft, each of which has different attributes, for jetting between beacons. What is at each beacon will be unknown to the player until they get there, but they can accumulate currency, equipment, and additional crew members by visiting more. One of the biggest things to note about FTL is just how difficult it is. If strategy isn't your strong suit, then this might not be the game for you. And even if it is, you still might find yourself having a tough old time. Still, the best things in life don't come easy, and if you stick with FTL, you'll feel mighty proud of yourself once you do crack it. Number 4, Hades. If you're looking for a roguelike that comes with a healthy dose of Greek mythology, then you're going to be in for a real treat if you pick up a copy of Hades. The hack-and-slash title follows Zagreus, son of Hades, as he attempts to escape the underworld. Aided by other Olympians, he must fight his way through a series of rooms populated with terrifying enemies and excellent rewards. If Zagreus' health drops below 0 at any point, he'll be taken back to the House of Hades and forced to begin his ordeal from the beginning. Fortunately, players can collect treasure and use this to buy upgrades for Zagreus, which will help him to succeed in subsequent runs. So although he will have to start over, he'll find the new run a little bit easier because he has a cool new ability or weapon. Critics had nothing but praise for Hades, and the game was lauded for its interpretation of Greek myths, the characterization of Zagreus and the gods, and its combat, which reviewers found to be fast-paced, exciting, and challenging. Don't worry if it's a little too difficult for you either, because you can always activate God mode and mow down Hades' legions with ease. Take that, you hell-dwelling scum! Number 3, Slay the Spire. Battling monsters and baddies with a sword is all well and good, but what if the universe blessed you with brains rather than brawn? Luckily, there's a game out there for those that enjoy their roguelikes, but would prefer them to be card-based, and that game is 2019's Slay the Spire. At the beginning of the game, players choose which character they like to use to take on the spire. Each one has different attributes, so some may start with more HP, whereas others may have better relics. From then, the player must proceed up the spire and defeat the monsters they come across along the way. The card game itself is quite straightforward. During each round, the player has limited energy to expend on attacks and defences, each of which require a different amount of energy to use. To defeat an enemy, the player must deplete their HP before the monster depletes theirs. And if they fail to do so, well, back to the bottom of the tower they go. At the end of each act is a boss that must be bested in order to proceed. Slay the Spire is simple to learn, but devilishly tricky to master, and you'll find it taking up hours of your time as you try, and in our writer's case, fail to reach the top. Number 2, Spelunky. Here's a fun fact about Spelunky. Not only is it a fantastic roguelike video game, but the name itself is a lot of fun to say out loud. Have a go! Spelunky! Fills you with joy, doesn't it? Released in 2008, Spelunky sees players controlling an unnamed adventurer as they embark on a quest to navigate a bunch of tunnels and obtain as much treasure as humanly possible. Naturally, said tunnels are infested with all sorts of beasties, and players will need to utilise their trusty whip in order to defeat the enemies. The game is split into 4 increasingly difficult areas, but as the risk increases, so does the reward. In later levels, players skilled enough to make it to the end will be rewarded with more valuable treasures and items. Keep an eye on those hearts though, because run out of them and it's right back to the beginning you go. Despite its somewhat cutesy outward appearance, Spelunky is an incredibly tricky game, with many traps and enemies able to kill the player almost instantly. If you're up for the challenge though, we almost guarantee that the constant sense of discovery will keep you hooked from the moment you hit start. And number 1, The Binding of Isaac. Fair warning to those of you thinking of playing The Binding of Isaac. The subject matter isn't the jolliest, but if you're after a great roguelike and don't mind the slightly disturbing storyline, then you really can't do much better. The plot of The Binding of Isaac is based on the biblical story of the same name. Isaac is a young boy who lives with his mother, and the two lead a fairly quiet life. Isaac enjoys drawing pictures while his mother watches Christian broadcasts on TV. However, all of this changes when the mother hears a voice from above that tells her that Isaac is corrupted by sin, and so she takes all of his toys and clothes, locks him in a room, and eventually tries to murder him with a butcher's knife. It's here where the gameplay begins, and players must make their way through the depths in order to defeat the mother. The levels within the depths are procedurally generated, and Isaac must fight off various monsters. As with most roguelikes, if Isaac dies, it's game over, though there are plenty of items that can help the little lad to survive his ordeal. With 17 different endings in the base game alone, this is one twisted tale you won't mind visiting again and again.